Jacob's family really well. We know that Jacob's family is one of the most dysfunctional families in the Old Testament. Asher wasn't the oldest son. Of being the oldest son. He wasn't the strongest. Second in power in all of Egypt. He wasn't the most beloved. You know, if you have 9 children, who gets all the attention? Finally, the last one, right? The last one gets the most attention, and that would have gone to Benjamin. Asher pretty much lived in the shadow of all the very popular brothers that Jacob had born. And when you think about it, this imperfect family, there really aren't many perfect families in the Old Testament, in the Bible. You look at Adam and Eve. As soon as Adam and Eve left the garden, their children, they're killing each other. Literally, older brother killed the younger one. A very dysfunctional family. You know Noah's sons. Noah was a drunk. He drank too much. And his children saw their father in nakedness, which is a great shame in that culture back then. You know, David, even David's family, Jesse, the father, their sons, they weren't very good to one another. David was neglected. Even King David, when he became king, you know the mess that was his family. His children died because of his sins. His children divided up the kingdom because of their sins. David, is it me? Am I doing something wrong? I want to leave a good legacy here after the show. This microphone is not going to help out. Even Jesus, his family was not all that great. I mean, in the midst of his ministry, if you look at Mark chapter 3, his brothers and Mary, the mom, they come and try to get him out of the room. Jesus is preaching and healing people. And Mary and his brothers said, everybody, please excuse our brother. He is crazy. And they tried to stop him from ministry. Asher, not only did he grow up in this family, he himself, when he became an adult, wasn't all that great. Let's see, go to the next slide. We're having all kinds of technical problems here. Besides that, Asher, he grew up in a very dysfunctional family. You know that there was parental favoritism in his family. We know that there was deceit, there was lying. You know that Asher was one of the brothers who schemed to have their younger brother Joseph sold into slavery. You know that they put him in a pit, they threw him in there, they had him stay there for a while, and then they sold him into slavery. Asher was one of the brothers that said, yes, let's do this. It's terrible. And Asher, like all his other brothers, continued, not for years, but many years, to hold this lie from his dad. Asher saw Jacob mourn daily for the lost son. And Asher, like all of his other brothers, kept a lie. That is an incredible deceit, to hold that kind of lie. Asher, the man, obviously did not have a very good start. But something happened. Something happened to Asher. Somehow there was a shift, or there was a transformation in his life. You know what his past was like. I know my daughter, who is now going off to college, I do not want my daughter marrying someone like Asher. I don't think any of you in this room would say Asher is a great father figure. But something happened, a shift, a transformation. We don't know when it happened, but eventually, Asher would leave a legacy. He would leave a family of children and grandchildren that was filled with wisdom, faith, character, service to their family, community, and to their nation. Asher and his children somehow, after he became married, and after he had children, and then his children's children, left an incredible legacy, and we're going to study that today. So before we begin, I'd like to ask you, what does a legacy mean? Well, I looked it up. Legacy is very simple. Legacy is something that you leave behind. Okay? It's, let me get a definition. Does this work? Can I get it to click to the next slide? Yes, there it goes. Anything handed down from the past as from an ancestor or predecessor. So, a legacy is your parents giving you a financial donation. Your parents giving you traits of self-esteem, confidence, beauty, good looks, or a home. A legacy. Asher did not have the best start as a human being. But somehow later on in his life, after he married, and after he had children, he left a legacy, not only for one generation, but many generations to come. We know that Asher went down to Egypt. He became a father of 4 sons. And when he went down to Egypt and lived with all the other Israelites, he also had a granddaughter. Now, if you look at Genesis chapter 46:17, Genesis chapter 46:17, you're going to find that all throughout the Old Testament. People leave genealogies of, this is my son, 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 and son. They rarely, almost never mention a daughter's name. I'm sorry, that was just the way it was back then. But for some reason, this granddaughter of Asher's is mentioned. Her name is Sarah. Now, I don't know why this granddaughter is mentioned among 53 grandsons of Asher. He had a big family. He was busy. But out of the 53 grandsons, and by the way, I'm sure he had grandchildren who were daughters as well. I'm sure he had daughters and daughters' daughters. But there's only one granddaughter that was mentioned. Actually, if you look at all the lineages in the Old Testament, daughters are not mentioned. Sarah is. For some reason, there was something about Sarah that could not be left unmentioned. There was something about her so powerful, so impressive. She must have made such an impact in her family that they could not exclude her from the biblical genealogy. That is something to note. Let's study a little bit about Sarah, the granddaughter of Asher. Jewish history, not in biblical history, but if you go to the Jewish history says that Sarah was a woman of great virtue, that she had a tremendous impact in her family. The Jewish rabbinical literature, which is commentaries by rabbis about the Old Testament, saying about Sarah that she was actually Asher's stepdaughter. You know what a stepdaughter is, right? Asher marries a woman who doesn't have a husband, but this woman happened to have a daughter. And they say that Sarah was 3 years old at the time. I'm going to turn this off and use the wireless. Exit, please. So here we go. Jewish history, virtuous and tremendous impact. Rabbinical literature says that she was the daughter of a widow, Hadurah. She, Sarah, was a product of a blended family. That means father, mom, and child, they all come from different people. Remember Jacob's father loved good food. Here is a blessing that Jacob gives to Asher. In Genesis chapter 49, verse 20, Asher's food will be rich. He will provide delicacies fit for a king. It sounds like, this guy's going to be a great chef. I don't know why that is inserted there. But there's something good about Asher's family. I'm going to fast forward now 400 years. 400 years later, Asher's family, his children, and whatever Asher did to make an impact is still significant 400 years later. Israel is about to enter the land of Canaan, enter the land of Israel. Moses was a great leader. He's about to die. And before he dies, he gets all the leaders of each tribe. And he gives special instructions to each one of them. And he runs through the 11 tribes, and he doesn't go in any particular order, but usually in the Bible, when it's the last one mentioned, there's something significant about it. It's like Adam was born first, Adam was created first. Who was created second? Eve. Right, guys? Remember, you're not the most important people in the world. The last person that Moses blesses before they enter into the promised land is Asher. And if you turn with me to Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 24. Let's all turn there together. Deuteronomy chapter 33. It's one of the last chapters of this book. In verse 24, Moses, before he dies, gives specific instructions of blessing. And to the tribe, the children of Asher, this is what he says. Most blessed of sons is Asher. Let him be favored by his brothers. Let him bathe his feet in oil. The bolts of your gates will be iron and bronze, and your strength will equal your days. Asher's children, I don't know if Asher's alive at this time, he's probably passed away. But now they're going to go in and continue the legacy that Father Asher started way back in Genesis chapter 46. Today after the sermon, I'm going to ask all the men of this congregation to come forward. And I'm going to ask you to make a commitment today as literal fathers of children or to be spiritual fathers, to come up and make a commitment to God. To be like Asher and leave a spiritual legacy for generations to come. We live in a society where all we do is live for myself. But one of the things that we realize is those who live for themselves never leave anything behind. And as Christians, we are called to make an impact. If you're not going to have children of your own, you adopt spiritual children. You mentor other people so that whatever God has given to you, you make a decision. I do not live for myself, but I live for the sake of others. That's one of the first things that we learn here. One of the first L's is not only do we love God, but we love others. And we live in community, wanting to make an impact. As pastors and leaders of the church make an impact in my life, I go out and make an impact in other people's lives as well. I'd like for you to think for just a moment. I'd like for you to just think just for a moment. It's a reminder to us, especially you fathers, or those of you men in here who might become fathers. If you're not going to have children, those of you that should be making an impact in the lives of others, that we simply cannot measure the impact of our lives during right now, this week or next week. We don't always get to see what we impressed upon people. Here's what I would like to say. We already read that. We can't always see how the choices we make today will impact our children. You don't know what kind of choices you make will impact someone else in the future. I know for myself, when I first became a Christian, it was Andrew Damien who invested his life into me. And I truly believe that I am still a Christian and became a pastor because of the impact he made. And I don't know if that was his purpose, but people have left something imprinted in me because of their actions. And today, you men here, I'd like to ask you to make a commitment to leave a legacy and not just live a life for yourself. Here's a man, Asher, who seemed very average. He lived in the shadow of very strong personalities, his brothers, Joseph, Judah, Benjamin, goes on and on. He made some huge mistakes. He comes from a very dysfunctional family. Sprinkled on top of that, he was a part of a blended family. There's nothing wrong with blended families, but there are added challenges. He has a stepdaughter, marries a widow, marries a woman who has no husband, and brings into the family a child, a granddaughter named Sarah. And Moses looks at this family of Asher, and they're about to go into the land of Canaan, one of the most pivotal moments in the history of Israel. And he looks at the children of Asher and says, there's something special about you guys. There's something special. And this is what he says. Number one, he says, most blessed is the sons of Asher, Moses says. Now, this word is very difficult to kind of translate. Some translations say, more blessed than sons is Asher, or let Asher be blessed with children. And he did have a lot of children. You know, in Numbers chapter 1, verse 41, do I have that? In Numbers chapter 1, verse 41, when they started out their desert travels in the desert, when Moses led the people out of Israel, and when the army was counted, Asher's family alone had 41,000 fighting men who were ready for battle. At the end of this book, right before they're about to enter into the land of Canaan, about 30 years afterwards, the tribe of Asher, the family of Asher, the children of Asher, the great-grandchildren of Asher, increased from 41,000 fighting men and then increased to 53,400 fighting men. That's an increase of about 20%. At a time when the total fighting population of the Israeli army went down 10%. Asher's children, the boys in that family, their military was ready to fight for their nation. God had promised Asher prosperity, that his children would be blessed both physically and spiritually, and we continue to see that at the most important moment in the history of Israel. Moses says about Asher's descendants in verse 24, let him be favored by his brothers, it says in verse 24. The word favored, you guys know what it means. I have a favorite ice cream, right? I have a favorite friend. Technology is just not working today. Favored means to approve, to be pleased with, to delight in. Moses is saying Asher is a person who is favored or liked by everyone. Even his brothers and siblings like Asher. I don't know. Maybe when they were trying to throw Joseph into the pit, maybe Asher was one of those brothers that you guys thought, maybe we should rethink this. Maybe when they continued to lie, he said to the brothers, maybe, hey guys, I know, I love you guys. We know we love our dad. Maybe we should tell them. No, don't do it, Asher. Maybe Asher was one of the peacekeepers. But Asher, even his children, carried that kind of personality of their grandfather, great-grandfather. He was favored. Research says that 45% of families in America, their relationships among the siblings, brothers and sisters, there is rivalry. Brothers and sisters in America, 45% of them do not get along. But Asher somehow was a man, Moses says, you, Asher, your children, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, they all have this special kind of thing about you. You know what I'm talking about, right? Your family is dysfunctional, but there's that one family in the street or at church, or they're just so good, it's unbelievable. It's like gross to you. Like, really? You really get along with your brothers and sisters? I mean, you really want to have Thanksgiving dinner with them? I don't believe you, right? Do you know what I'm talking about? Asher was one of those families. They just liked each other. When the Lord takes pleasure in anyone's ways, He causes their enemies to make peace with them. When Lord takes pleasure in someone and the favor of God is upon someone, people like to be around them. And this is something that we should pray for as people of God. We should pray that people like us. We should pray that we are likable because we are Christians. We are people who have been forgiven. We are people who are going to heaven. We are people who are loved and are trying to love others. It's inevitable, obviously, that when brothers and sisters and family members get together, that fights occur, right? Even our parents, mom and dads fight. I mean, I fight, my wife and I, we fight, and our children see this, and I'm sure my children have said the same thing I said when I saw my parents fight. I'm never going to be like my parents when I grow up. I'm never going to fight like them. Well, I'm fighting like my parents now. Oh my gosh. But somehow Asher's family was blessed with favor. Romans chapter 12, verse 18. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ God forgave you. When I think about these verses about being kind to one another, I really do think about our brother Tommy. Whenever we've had problems at our church, Deacon Tommy was always the one to say, Pastor Steve, I know you are angry about this. And he'd always set me aside and try to calm me down. And whenever something bad happened, he'd be always the one to, Pastor Steve, don't worry. It's going to be okay. We support you. People are behind this project. Don't worry, just pray. I don't know too many people that do not like Deacon Tommy. I don't know too many people that hate him. One of the trademarks or the qualifications of a deacon in the church is that he has found respect by all people. That there is favor upon a person's life. And so I ask you, please pray for Deacon Tommy, that he'll be well. Thank you, many of you who went to their house yesterday to help the family move into their new home. Thank you for praying for him. When I almost, I don't want to say died, but when I was burned up, it was Tommy that drove me down to the hospital. And I remember, I think I was weeping in the car. I was like in shock. I was shaking and I was crying. And I remember Tommy saying to me, Pastor Steve, it's okay, don't worry. He just placed his hands on my shoulder. Just a calming presence. And I don't know if Asher was this way with his children. Because I'm sure he saw craziness in his own home. But somehow the rest of his children and the impact for generations to come, there was something special about this family. The second thing is, he says in verse 24, Moses says to Asher's descendants, let him bathe his feet in oil. Now you know that back in that culture, washing feet was very difficult. And bathing your feet in oil was something that only rich people did. When Joshua divided up the land of Israel, the family of Asher, they got the best portions. If I could show you this map of the Middle East, if if it will turn there. There it goes. It's very slow. This is the Middle East. And if you go to the right side here, you can't see it, is Israel. If I can go to the next slide. This is Israel. And way at the top there, the yellow portion, all the way up at the top, that's his tribe. That was the land that Asher got. That land is right next to the ocean. There is the modern-day city of Haifa is there. It's a very popular resort town. They grow olive trees there. Olive trees, and those trees in that area have a lot of oil. Even to this day, one tree produces 15 gallons of oil. Soil was wonderful. Everything that was grown in that area flourished. You know, every Christ follower is kind of like Asher. When we say that you're dipped in oil, you know, in the New Testament and in the Old, oil is a symbol of what? Do you know? God's favor, Spirit. God's favor and His Spirit. The anointing of the Spirit. You know, we as Christians, we've also been anointed with God's Spirit. We have an abundance. In Ephesians it says, we have the riches of God's grace in our lives. Boundless riches of Christ. Romans says, the riches of His kindness, the riches of His glories upon us. One of the greatest riches that we have as Christians is the richness of the oil and the presence of the indwelling presence of God the Holy Spirit within us. So when the preacher back in the old days talked about, man, that preacher is on fire, they would say, man, he's just anointed with oil. His feet are dipped in oil. You know, I think in order to be a father, in order to be a man these days, to really leave a legacy, you need the power of the Holy Spirit in your lives. You need something greater than muscles. You need something more than just intellect. You need God's power to be a man these days. You know how difficult it is to be a father? It's so easy. You know, these days, fathers, if it's difficult, they just leave the house and run away. And then moms are left to stay and fend for the family. It takes great guts to stand your ground. It takes great bravery and courage and something inside. I don't know what it is, a moxie, loyalty, or persevering spirit to say, I will not be moved. God's Spirit is strong in me. And that will take care of my business. And that will not flee from the difficulty that is in front of me. That is one of the greatest riches that we have as Christians. God, the Holy Spirit, and men, fathers, future fathers here today. I ask you to pray, fill me with Holy Spirit, that I may be a man among men, that I may be a father that will leave a legacy. If our slides work, there is a symbol of the Holy Spirit. That slide is way too late. Go to the next slide. Moses blessed Asher with this last thing. The bolts of your gates will be iron and bronze, and your strength will be equal to your days. This is a promise of military strength. You know how strong Asher's sons are. There were many who were ready for battle. Asher's descendants actually proved to be more than just fighting men. When you go to 1 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 40, write that down in your notes. In 1 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 40, this is what it says about Asher's children, his family, the sons that he had. And not to mention, I'm sure, daughters. This is what it says. Let's read it all together. All these descendants of Asher, heads of families, choice men, brave warriors, outstanding leaders, the number of men ready for battle, as listed in their genealogy, was 26,000. Heads of families, choice men, brave warriors, outstanding leaders, men who are ready for battle. And then it says in verse 25, your strength will equal your days. That verse, that phrase, it means that they have the strength not for tomorrow, but they have the strength for today. On this day, I have the power, the courage, the steadfastness, not to be moved for today. I don't know about you, but life is difficult. Just try to imagine how difficult it is for Tommy right now. He's fully aware of what's going on. I'm sure as he sits there in his hospital bed for a week, connected to a ventilator, he's thinking about his children. I know he's thinking about his children. You know, I recall, when that fire was rising, when I was surrounded, Pastor Daniel says I was surrounded by fire. And as that fire was coming, the first thought that came to my mind is, I cannot die because of my youngest daughter, Talia. And the first thing I did was, you know, in movies when people are on fire, they move around like this. Well, I learned, my brain clicked. When I had training as a young elementary student, drop, roll, right? Drop and roll. And I had to live because I wanted to be there for my youngest daughter. I'm sure Tommy's thinking the same thing. But more than just our own very children, dear friends, Asher did not see the legacy that he would leave. As Christians, we've been called to make an impact, men. We've been asked to become leaders, to stand and to say, I will not live for myself, I will live in service to others. You know what kind of man Deacon Tommy is? Every Sunday he comes and cleans the tables here so that you don't have to sit on dusty tables. I remember one time when people were accusing me of false things, I remember sitting down with Tommy saying, Pastor Steve, you are here. I am here for you. Those words were incredibly comfortable. I remember afterwards talking to Pastor Daniel Cho and talking to my wife, I said, you know what? I'm going to continue no matter what. Your strength will equal your days. Men, fathers, I ask you to make a commitment today to leave a lasting legacy for the people who will come after you. Do not live only for yourself, but live for others. Amen? Amen. I end this sermon as we read earlier. You know, this old lady was very old at the temple praying night and day. You know who her great-great-great-grandfather was, right? Who is it? It's Asher. One of the oldest ladies that we read about in the Old Testament. She was still aware. There was a spiritual DNA. There was an influence from families, from children, from parents and uncles past that somehow directed her to that temple to be aware, to be cognizant that one day the Messiah will come. And this old lady recognized Jesus. And dear friends, that's what we want to make a commitment to. Guys, men, fathers, I'd like to ask you to stand with me. I'm going to ask Pastor James and Pastor Daniel and Pastor Dan to come up. I'd like for you to stand, men, with us up here in the front and say, I want to leave a legacy for our church, for our family. And to say, I don't want to live for myself. I want to be an impact to others. If you're up here, guys, let's hold hands to the person next to you. Staff,